Hey everyone, I'm so excited with a really special guest here. And we've put this off for a couple of weeks, and I'll tell you guys why here in a little bit. But I have Tanner Guzy here with us. Tanner is a specialist in men's style. And certainly anybody that's followed me for the years, you know that I am not. So Tanner is here to talk about that. So, Tanner, thanks so much for making the time.
Thanks for having me on, Doug. I'm really excited to go through this with you.
Yeah, I am too. So, as I was explaining to you, Tanner, a lot of our men, or all of our men, 100% are all business owners. So they're leaders in their respective industries, and many of them titans, and they're very much in the public eye. And so, what a lot of us guys, it seems to me, at least I have, is over time, you just kind of give in to the easy, perhaps lazy lifestyle when it comes to fashion. It's almost too
hmm
confusing. You could, it seems like guys go to one extreme or the other. So, how did you
Right.
get started in all this?
So I've been really like hypersensitive to this stuff since I was a teenager. I remember I was 13, 14 years old, and I had these two very disparate identities. I was really involved in the punk rock music scene, BMX, snowboarding, all of this stuff. And at the same time, I went to a Christian private school. And so on one side, you have the uniform of the green Liberty spikes and the bondage pants and the battle jackets and all of this other stuff. And then on the other side, it's the rep stripe and the gray slacks and the navy blazer. And I felt this massive clash between how I wanted to be and how I was forced to be. And what really clicked with me very early on was not only how other people treated me based on the way that I dressed, but also what you've already kind of hit on is how I felt about myself,
Hmm.
where I felt like I had to put on the uniform literally or the costume, and it was incongruent with who I was and who I wanted to be. And so that was always kind of buzzing in the back of my head. And then as I got older and realized that I'm not that punk skate kid anymore, and I don't want to dress that way because it's killing job prospects, and I'm not dating the women I want to date to be able to get where I want to be in life. Then you go through this identity change and have to figure all this out. And I've always just been a very analytical person when it comes to trying to find the underlying principles and philosophies and stuff like that. And so weirdly, I decided to apply it to men's fashion, which is odd, but that's where it started. Started writing a blog, and that was 10 years ago, and it's picked up, and I've been able to help thousands of men since then. So it's been a cool journey.
Well, it's awesome because, the power of social media, right? I put this out there in a post looking for someone to speak about men's fashion to our guys. And your name came up time and time again, recommended by people who I really respect and trust. And that's a rarity, especially in this day and age. So you've made a mark for yourself doing this and helped out a lot of men.
Yeah, and I appreciate that many men appreciate what I've done and that they recommended you. I know quite a few of the guys, and they're great men, and I love that they're in the group. And yeah, you've got some, from what I've been able to tell, you've got high caliber men that you get to work with, which is awesome.
Yeah, I'm very, very, very lucky. Well, I can tell you for myself, right? We've shared this with you off air, but I grew up in Southern California. Sandals and shorts is pretty much what I wore. And then, going through my professional career, one of the things that I noticed is we'd wear a suit or, business casual. And then at
hmm
lunch break, everybody would race down to the beach and, put on board shorts, try to get in the water or whatever it may be. And then it was back to this uniform. And then happy hour, the first thing everybody does is they take off that quote, quote, uniform to come onto. And you kind of touched on this. But for a lot of guys, I think where we get stuck and maybe even give up is we almost feel like we're putting on a mask in one place and then taking it off. It's like, how do I determine what my style is or look is or my identity as a middle-aged man?
Yeah, yeah, and you're right. I think that's where most men are, especially if you work in an environment in which there's a dress code and there are expectations, and it feels in some way stifling. And the biggest thing that we're missing with this is we feel like aesthetics, style, clothing, the uniform is something that is externally imposed upon us by somebody else. Maybe it's by the industry, maybe it's by, when you're not running your own gig, it's your boss or it's somebody else, rather than recognizing that that may be a template with a few boundaries so things don't go totally crazy, but there's a whole lot of room in there for you to take the internal version of who you are and signal the things that are unique about you. And so maybe that may be credibility, authority, trustworthiness, dignity, respect. It may be approachability or likability. There are all these things that you can then still express while playing within coloring inside the lines, but we don't think about it that way. We just think a suit is a suit is a suit, board shorts are board shorts, my gym clothes are my gym clothes. And we never learn to speak the language of aesthetics And so we never get the benefit of actually speaking that language and really being articulate, not only in how we express ourselves to other people, but most importantly, not feeling like we're stifled when we do have to wear the uniform, because it actually is a version of us that's in that uniform. And so it feels very congruent and authentic and consistent when we do it the right way.
I love that. Starting from the inside, going outward. Is what we
Absolutely.
work with a lot of the men on. All right. So where does a guy start? Right. Fashion seems so overwhelming. The guys in the magazines don't represent me. Right. And my
Right.
lifestyle.
Good. Ignore them. Fashion. And that's really one of the biggest things. And this is, I really go out of my way to even make a distinction between fashion and style, because fashion really is that. It's the magazines. It's those terrible runway shows. It's the stuff that you see on YouTube or on other places. These are the 5 shoes you need to wear this year to be on trend. And that's irrelevant. Style is, again, understanding who you are and how you fit in the world, and then how you externally express that. And so it's being able to pick things like, okay, you're from Southern California. You know what your identity is based on that. How can we take that same casual, laid back ethos that comes across in board shorts and flip flops and apply that to what you have to wear to work? And how do we start to extrapolate that? And I've got a whole process where we can look at things like what does and doesn't work with your body, who your audience is, what the environment is. There's a whole system that you can go through. And once you get familiar with that, then it becomes really easy and intuitive to figure out what you want to wear in any environment with anybody at any time. It becomes really easy once you figure out what those basic principles are.
So Tanner, how do you handle somebody who has changed, right? So here I am, the Southern California boy. Now I live in the mountains, right? So very different style. Everybody here wears plaid. I didn't own anything plaid, for my first 40 years of life, let alone, doing it now. But I also travel to Morocco and lead events, or I'm in Europe, or, I might be down in a more conservative part of America, still leading these types of courses and speaking events. How does someone marriage those differences coming through their life?
So there's 2 different ways that we can look at that, because some of it is big macro changes where you find yourself, I'm a totally different person than I was 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And honestly, you should be. You're not progressing if you're the same person you were 15 years ago. And your style should change with that. I think one of the biggest mistakes that most men make, you can see when they peaked, or when they kind of peaked at their biggest identity, when they felt the most that way, because they still dress like that. I see guys who are still wearing goatees like it's 1995, or they're still wearing the stuff that was popular in the late 80s, or they're wearing stuff when I was in high school in like the early 2000s. And you can tell that was the point in their life in which they felt like, I have established my identity and I'm going to hold on to this as long as I can. And we're just going to ride that wave, because anything else is an abandonment of that, which is really kind of funny, because you don't hold on to that from a business perspective. You don't hold on to that from a relationship perspective, from a fitness perspective, or any of these major things. But for some reason, we signal to ourselves that if I abandon my style, then I've either sold out, or I've changed, or I'm not the same person that I used to be. And so it becomes this almost emotional security blanket that it doesn't need to be. Your style should change with you as you grow and evolve. And it actually helps solidify in your head that you've progressed and you've grown and you've evolved, and you're not that same person that you were 15 years ago. It gets rid of a lot of the imposter syndrome that a lot of guys experience as they make progress.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You say the imposter syndrome, because we do have a number of guys who are making that switch, right? They've kind of refound themselves in the later years of their lives. They focused on business, right? Crushed it, but then they look up and people aren't around. And so as they find themselves, they're kind of like, oh crap, now I want to be better, my sexual market value, so to speak. I want that to increase. I want to showcase the man and the identity I am. And then they're just overwhelmed, right? You got the skater shop that, caters to the 40-year-old who's still trying to look like he rides a skateboard. And then you got, Banana Republic or something along those lines.
Yep.
So where does a guy start?
The biggest thing is to start. So this is one of the first things that I start with my guys. And this is something that you guys can do. I've got a free quiz for this. What I teach, the main thing is I've got 3 archetypes. You start with that. And if you know what your archetype is and the way that you interact with the world, that makes things really, really easy. I'll tell you a quick story about this. I've got an uncle who is about as rugged individualist as it gets. He lives in a small town in eastern Idaho of like 150 people population. Never been married, not interested in having kids. He has dogs and he's a falconer, like just as rugged cowboy legitimate as it gets. And about 3 years ago, my grandma died, his mom, and he knew that I was working for a custom suit company at the time. And he needed a suit. He never had one, and he needed one to be able to wear to the funeral, but he didn't want it to be a nice, slick, shiny suit because then it would be distracting him. He wouldn't be able to focus on the service and mourning her and being with his siblings because he would be too caught up in feeling self-conscious and really irritated subconsciously about the way that he dressed. And so my understanding that this is how he was, and he was more of this cowboy, we were able to change, select material that had more texture and was a little bit more rough and rugged. And we did it in a way that it still looked respectful without having a tie on. And we made it so that it fit so he could wear his boots. And so he still looked very dignified and very respectable and respectful. He was very appropriate for that circumstance. It wasn't a distraction for anybody else that was there. And most importantly, what he had on wasn't a distraction for himself either. He was able to fully focus on what he was there to do and why he was there, as opposed to having this low buzz in the back of his head of, this is ridiculous. I hate this. I can't wait to get out of this stupid monkey suit. And so when you start off with this idea of knowing what your archetype is and knowing how you interact with the world, and then you have an understanding of what are these different tools, maybe it's pattern or color or fit or texture or all these other things, and how you can tweak those to be able to align with what that aesthetic archetype is, that's where you can start to make some real good progress. And that answers the second part of your question of, how do I dress in a way that feels congruent if I'm in Morocco versus when I'm in the mountains versus when I'm at the beach? And you can take those same underlying principles. I mean, it's the same thing with language. You don't feel like you're a faker when you speak differently at a church than you do at a ball game, than you do at a kids event, because you understand the nuances of how you're supposed to gauge these things. And you can still be yourself and express yourself in appropriate ways, but it's because you've established that skill set. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. So what you're saying here is just another form of communication. You're
Totally
communicating to everybody else, sending signals is the word you used, to everybody around you of what you're about and, what's important to you.
Yep, absolutely. It really is. It's a totally effective version of communication. And when you learn about idioms or languages or dialect or any of that kind of stuff, then you can be just as fluent and just effective with your visuals as you are with your audible language.
One of the things that I really loved about your approach when you and I first chatted, because I had a lot of people reach out, as I think I told you, is you start from the inside out, as we already talked about, and really looking at those little things, right? We all know that when you walk in a room, whether you're speaking or it's a business deal or it's with your wife or a potential lover, whatever it may be, that your energy comes in first. Then you're going to get first impressions on your aesthetics, your looks, and people are going to make those snap judgments. And what I really liked about your approach is you're starting with the inside, what really matters to the individual and to that man themselves, rather than, just going, hey, look, you need to own 3 black shirts, 4 pairs of these jeans, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep. Yeah. And that approach, that kills your energy, because you're right. The first thing people pay attention to is your energy. And for men like you who are listening that are leaders in your industry and you're leading your own business, if you come in with energy that has been hindered or dampened by the fact that you're adhering to somebody else, as opposed to leading with, you are your own man and you're leading with your own energy, people won't be able to quantify that, but they will be able to recognize that. And that comes across aesthetically just as much as it does for any of these other subconscious or very, minute levels of communication. Yeah. There's a big difference between a guy who looks like he's wearing a suit because he has to, and one who looks like he's wearing a suit because he wants to.
Yeah. And I totally agree. And there's people that own certain clothes, right? The kind of classic guy that can wear jeans and a black t-shirt, but nice shoes if they own it, they can look just as dressed up as the guy in the suit.
Right. And that's an important point to hit on, because a lot of guys who do what I do is they get caught up in this very prescriptive approach. And it's, well, the always dress for the job you want and not the one you have, or dress like people did in your industry back in the 60s, or this is the uniform that you're supposed to be wearing. And that's all garbage, because we don't live in a homogenous community anymore where the suit now means something universal to everybody. We exist in these micro tribes, and the way that things are expressed and communicated are very different. If you work in the tech industry and you're showing up at conferences or investor meetings or things like that, and you're wearing a 3-piece suit, you're a moron, because you're expressing that you're completely socially inarticulate. You do not understand the cues of what's accepted and what's expected within this tribe, and you're still leaning on the own world or on the old world. And so really what you end up communicating is, I'm kind of socially obtuse and I don't know what's going on here. I don't belong in this room.
Mhm. Very, very good point. And you see it all the time. We see it at events as well. And to your point, we have over 2,000 active men involved in the movement we call the Powerful Man. And so we get hit up all the time. And a gentleman did approach me and said, "Hey, look, I'd like to speak to your guys. And here's my philosophy: find out exactly what people were wearing in the 50s or 40s in your area, and that's what you want to wear today." And it just I mean, I'd be a lumberjack, I guess, at this point.
Right.
It made no
Talk about
sense.
a mask and a costume.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So what, another question. So guys I know listening to this are going, great, this is awesome, I understand this, but I'm still a little confused, right? There's
Mhm.
where do the short of talking just to Tanner, where do I get started in this whole process? Do I clean out my closet? Do I start from scratch? What do I do?
It's hard to be able to give quick wins on this because really, like we said, it's trying to teach somebody how to speak a new language,
Okay.
and so is there something as simple as, and there are a lot of guys who will hit on things like this where you can immediately get some good quick wins if you focus on the way your stuff fits.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's very contextual because if you're in an industry or in a part of the world or you're part of a tribe where things are slim fit and you're still wearing baggy stuff, then move in that direction. Or if you're in one of those, but stuff fits a little bit differently and it's not the extra slim fit stuff, then you shouldn't be doing that. And so there are no universals as far as, we get these colors or you focus on these textures or you ditch these patterns that can really be applicable because it's teaching how to speak a language, and it's not even a universal language because there are multiple different languages to speak. And so really, without like totally shilling on stuff, just start paying attention to some of the stuff that I teach and get a good understanding of what this deeper stuff is, because once you start with that established baseline, then it does become easier to look at, okay, my clothes should fit this way, or I should be wearing these colors, or this is way too formal, or this is way too casual. And then you don't have to get caught in the tactical approach when you understand what the strategic approach is.
Okay. And when you're working with men, do you have them go work with somebody in person, either a tailor or go to a specific professional shopper or what have you going through there?
I have quite a few clients who, when we find out that suiting is part of what they need with their wardrobe, a lot of times they'll fly out to me because I've got a great clothier here in Salt Lake City that I used to be associated with, and they love working with my guys. Or a lot of times I'll go out to them and find them if they're in, major areas where they've got really good tailors and stuff like that as well. But for a lot of my guys, they end up in, man, so many of my clients, we never even need to buy a suit or anything, even business casual. We get just as good at doing sneakers, jeans, and t-shirts and making those look just as powerful and impactful as a lot of this more formal stuff. And so I don't ever recommend that they go to shoppers, because then what you're doing is, one, you are deferring the decision-making process to somebody who doesn't understand your needs as well as you do. And two, most of the time, these shoppers are people that are trained to be focused on what's in trend, what's going to move. And really, for the most part, and this is one of the biggest differences between men and women, is women want to signal certain things like youth or trendiness or sexual availability or innocence or other things. And obviously, I'm speaking in generalizations. Whereas for a lot of us as men, there's a liability to
Mhm.
signal those things. It's like you're talking about the guy who's 50 and he's graying and he's still dressing like a skater. He doesn't look like he's still young and youthful and vibrant. He looks like he's in denial. Right. And
Yeah.
that's a problem for us, because not only are you in denial, but then you also look like you've never actually been battle hardened or tested. You don't have any of that credibility or authority or trustworthiness. And those are the things that we need to signal. So how do you do that when not everybody wears suits? How do you do that in jeans and a t-shirt and sneakers? Or how do you do that in shorts and flip-flops? You can, but a lot of it again is understanding what these little aspects are of fit or texture or color, or how to combine all these things together and make it work that way.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Well, Tanner, you've been so gracious with your time. What are a couple things these guys can do right now? And then afterwards, I'd love to give them information on how they can reach out to you if they want to.
Yes. Okay. I will give you a couple kind of easy things right here, right now. Um, if you've got more colors in your closet, then I'll give you the 5 neutrals, because these all work with everything else. And they also work on everybody, irrespective of your coloring or your complexion or all of that. Black, white, blue, brown, and gray. If you've got something beyond that in there, give it a rest for a little while. Maybe don't completely ditch it, but give it a rest for a little while. And as you learn a little bit more about how well it works or how to combine this stuff, maybe then that's the point where you ditch it, or you really lean into it and you hold on to it and go, this is a great statement piece. I want to wear this. It's totally consistent with the style that I want to signal. So that's, start with some good neutral colors. And then when it comes to fit stuff, if you've got anything that either looks like it was popular in the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, and you're still holding on to it from a fit perspective, get rid of it. That doesn't mean you have to go to hyper skinny stuff, nor does it mean you have to go to hyper baggy stuff. Just wear things that look like they follow your natural lines, but they're not going to restrict any movement. I'll tell you, if you guys are bigger, if you don't have your fitness dialed in yet, wearing baggy stuff doesn't hide the fact that you're overweight. It actually just makes you look both overweight and sloppy. So it exacerbates the problem instead of hiding it. Same thing if you're a really skinny guy. If you wear something that's bigger, it doesn't make you look bigger. It makes you look scrawny and like a kid that can't fill out his stuff. So find things that are just a good, average, neutral fit. Avoid the trends. And then again, as you get deeper into understanding what are the signals that you want to send, then you can start expanding from there. So neutral colors, neutral fits, start playing with that, and that'll give you some easy wins right away.
Love it. Absolutely love it. I guess I got to go clean out my high school clothes. Awesome, Tanner. So guys that are interested in working with you or finding more, you suggested maybe your blog or a quiz, where can they go?
Yes. So you can go to masculine-style.com. That's the main website. There is a quiz on there called the archetype quiz. There are the 3 archetypes and 8 questions, and it'll tell you what the answer is, and that gets you on the mailing list. If you guys are more social media type guys, I am most active on Instagram and on Twitter, and you can find me there at Tanner Guzy. And if you guys are more the reader types, I have published a book on this called The Appearance of Power, and you can find that on Amazon, Audible, all that good stuff as well.
I love it, man. Well, congratulations on your new one, my friend, and Thanks. So glad you could make this happen.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate you having me on, man.
Yeah.